In 2007, Nassim Nicholas Taleb published a book in which he observed that a single rare event can invalidate thousands of prior observations that were considered stable, introducing a radical discontinuity in expectations. A commonly used example to introduce this concept involves a domesticated animal that receives daily care, regular food, and encounters no observable threats over a long period of time. Each day that passes without negative consequences reinforces the expectation that the next day will resemble the previous ones. This expectation does not arise from an understanding of the overall structure of the system, but from a linear extrapolation of a sequence of past data. The final event, which abruptly interrupts the sequence, does not merely alter the future, it retroactively restructures the meaning of all prior observations, which suddenly prove irrelevant as predictive tools. If this type of analysis interests you, subscribe to the channel for similar content. Taleb defines this type of event as a black swan, using a term that refers to an observation that is rare, expected unexpectedly according to dominant models, has effects disproportionate to its perceived probability, and is later rationalized as if it had been predictable. The central notion does not concern statistical rarity in a strict sense, but rather the failure of knowledge systems to correctly represent the distribution of possible outcomes. The point is not that the event is absolutely unpredictable, but that it is invisible within the models used to interpret reality. A fundamental aspect of Taleb's analysis is the distinction between two different statistical environments he calls mediocristan and extremistan. In mediocristan, variables observed are subject to natural limits that prevent any single value from dominating the whole. Human body weight is an example of this type of distribution. Even the heaviest individual contributes marginally to the total, and the average remains representative of the group. In this context, extreme deviations do not significantly alter general conclusions, and traditional statistical techniques function relatively reliably. Extremistan, by contrast, is an environment in which there are no strict natural limits on the magnitude of variables, and where a single value can dominate the entire distribution. Economic wealth is a typical example. In a sample that includes even one extremely wealthy individual, most of the total value is concentrated in that single observation. In these systems, the average loses descriptive meaning, and the variance is dominated by rare events. The modern global economy, highly digitalized and based on intangible goods, operates predominantly in extremistan because quantities like profits, market capitalizations, or audiences are not constrained by physical or biological limits. This type of structure produces winner-take-all systems in which a small minority captures a disproportionate share of resources. Taleb emphasizes that in these systems, it becomes extremely difficult to separate the contribution of individual skill from that of chance. Even if effort and competence are necessary conditions, they are not sufficient to explain extreme outcomes. Simulations conducted in extremistan-like environments show that even starting from similar initial conditions, a few extreme winners and a large mass of average or failed outcomes inevitably emerge. Added to this is a specific epistemic bias that Taleb calls survivorship bias. Publicly available narratives tend to focus on cases of success because they are the only ones that produce documentation, autobiographies, interviews, and retrospective analyses. Failures, although statistically far more numerous, leave no equivalent traces. This informational imbalance leads to an overestimation of the predictability of success and an underestimation of the role of randomness. The systematic absence of data on failures distorts our understanding of the system's real dynamics. The mechanism of retrospective rationalization is another central element. After an unexpected event occurs, explanations emerge that connect the outcome to signals that were not considered relevant beforehand. This process creates the illusion that the event was, in fact, predictable, when in reality the available information did not alter collective behavior prior to the event. A frequently cited example is the September 11, 2001 attacks. Only afterwards were prior signals reinterpreted as obvious indicators, whereas before they had produced no structural changes in security systems. This dynamic is tied to a general limitation of knowledge applied to complex systems. Yuval Noah Harari has described a paradox according to which knowledge that does not change behavior is ineffective, while knowledge that does change behavior rapidly loses validity because it alters the context it describes. In adaptive systems, any intervention based on a prediction changes the initial conditions, rendering the prediction itself obsolete. This is particularly true in financial markets, where the widespread adoption of a strategy eliminates its effectiveness. Taleb defines the ludic fallacy as the error of treating open, complex systems as if they were closed games with stable rules and known probabilities. Games like blackjack or dice rolls have well-defined distributions and clear limits. Financial markets, geopolitical systems, or technological networks do not share these characteristics. Applying simple probabilistic models to extremistan contexts produces a false sense of control and increases vulnerability to shocks. Growing technological interconnectedness further amplifies these effects. In highly interdependent systems, a local failure can rapidly propagate on a global scale. Taleb cites cases in which a limited technical action produced unforeseen consequences across global infrastructures, illustrating how complexity obscures causal chains. In these contexts, optimized efficiency reduces error absorption margins, increasing the overall fragility of the system. A frequently discussed example involves coronal mass ejections, known and observable solar phenomena, which in the 19th century produced effects limited to rudimentary technologies such as the telegraph. In a contemporary world, based on extensive power grids, satellites, and digital systems, an event of similar intensity would generate far broader economic and functional impacts. Even in the presence of a non-negligible estimated probability, systemic preparedness remains limited because the immediate costs of preventative measures outweigh the benefits perceived in the short term. This shows that vulnerability does not stem solely from ignorance, but also from structural incentives that discourage prevention of high-impact, low-frequency events. A crucial point in Taleb's analysis is the relativity of the black swan concept relative to the observer's epistemic position. An event may be completely unexpected for those who suffer its consequences and entirely ordinary for those who control the system. The distinction does not concern the event itself, but the asymmetry of information and power. This leads Taleb to focus less on obvious publicly discussed risks and more on hidden, systemic, and non-linear ones that do not emerge in dominant models. It's important to clarify that the black swan concept does not apply only to negative events. Extremely improbable positive outcomes belong to the same structural category. The birth of a specific individual resulting from a chain of events with extraordinarily low probability is an example of an unpredictable positive outcome. However, such events cannot be planned or anticipated using traditional predictive tools because they share the same causal opacity as negative shocks. Overall, the analysis of black swans describes a world in which uncertainty is not a temporary deviation, but a structural property of modern complex systems. The increase in scale, speed, and interconnectedness makes extreme events more relevant, while models based on averages become progressively less informative. In this context, knowledge takes an asymmetric form, in which what is unknown often carries greater weight than what can be measured. The theoretical framework proposed by Taleb does not offer operational solutions, but it provides a conceptual structure for understanding why confidence accumulated through repeated observations may be abruptly invalidated, and why past experience does not guarantee future stability in extremistan-type environments. If this type of systemic analysis is relevant to you, subscribe to the channel for similar content.